The thick green mist swirled around Daniel Carter as he carefully stepped forward. His boots sank slightly into the damp ground, making a soft, squelching sound. The air smelled of rot, and the buzzing of unseen insects filled the silence. This place was known as the Black Mire, a deadly toxic swamp on the planet Vexor 9. Even the toughest alien species avoided it. Daniel wasn't here by choice. As a human explorer and scavenger, he searched for rare minerals to sell. His scanner had detected a valuable energy source nearby, something strong enough to power an entire ship. He adjusted his oxygen mask, scanning the area carefully. One wrong step, and he could sink into the poisonous mud. Then he froze. Through the fog, he spotted something unusual. A figure lay motionless near the edge of the swamp, half submerged in the sludge. An alien woman. Her armor was cracked and covered in dirt. Her long, dark hair clung to her face, and her body was unnaturally still. Even from a distance, Daniel could tell she was injured. His instincts screamed at him to turn back. The Black Mire was no place for heroics. But as he looked at the unconscious woman, something in his chest tightened. She was dying. Without hesitation, Daniel secured his gear and moved forward. The toxic mud sucked at his boots, slowing his pace. He pulled out a metal grappling hook, attached it to his belt, and launched it at a sturdy rock nearby. If he slipped, at least he wouldn't sink completely. Reaching her side, he dropped to one knee. Her breathing was faint, her chest rising and falling weakly. Strange golden markings glowed softly on her skin beneath the broken armor. He had never seen an alien like her before. Daniel touched her shoulder gently. "Hey, can you hear me?" No response. He checked her pulse, weak but still there. If he didn't act fast, she wouldn't last much longer. Gritting his teeth, he slid his arms beneath her body and lifted. She was heavier than expected, her muscular frame pressing against his arms. Her armor was made of some unknown metal, dense but flexible. The swamp resisted him. Every step forward was a battle against the sinking mud. Sweat dripped down his face as he pulled the grappling hook's rope, dragging himself and the alien woman back toward solid ground. Halfway there, the ground beneath him shifted. A deep growl echoed through the fog. Daniel's stomach twisted. He knew that sound. Something was hunting them. Turning his head slowly, he saw a massive swamp predator rise from the mud. A Strixien leech beast. Its slimy body was covered in dark chitinous plates, and its many glowing yellow eyes locked onto him. Daniel cursed under his breath. Not now. The creature let out a wet, snarling hiss before lunging. Daniel barely dodged, rolling to the side while keeping a tight grip on the alien woman. The creature's clawed tentacles slammed into the ground where he had just been standing, splashing toxic sludge in every direction. He couldn't fight it. Not while carrying her. His heart pounded as he sprinted toward safety. The shore was only a few steps away, but the leech beast was fast. Its powerful limbs propelled it forward, closing the distance too quickly. Daniel reached for his pistol, twisting mid-run to fire a shot. The blue energy bolt struck the creature's armored hide, but barely left a mark. Damn it. Another attack came, this time from above. The beast's tentacle lashed out, wrapping around his ankle. Daniel fell hard, the impact forcing the air from his lungs. The alien woman slipped from his grasp, rolling a few feet away. His head pounded, but there was no time to recover. The leech beast tightened its grip, dragging him toward its massive, tooth-filled mouth. Daniel gritted his teeth, reaching for his survival knife. With all his strength, he slashed at the slimy tentacle. The blade cut deep, releasing a thick, black liquid. The beast shrieked in pain, recoiling for just a second. But that was all Daniel needed. He scrambled forward, grabbed the alien woman again, and threw himself toward the solid ground. He made it. The beast roared in frustration, but it couldn't leave the swamp. It lurked at the edge, watching him with hungry eyes before sinking back into the toxic depths. Daniel collapsed onto his back, panting hard. His arms and legs burned from exertion, but he had done it. The alien woman was safe. She let out a weak, ragged breath. Then her golden eyes fluttered open. For a moment, they stared at each other in silence. Then she spoke in a hoarse, commanding voice. "Who are you?" Daniel's breath was still heavy as he stared at the alien woman lying beside him. Her golden eyes were sharp, glowing faintly in the dim light of the toxic swamp's mist. Even though she had been unconscious moments ago, there was now a dangerous intensity in her gaze. She struggled to sit up, wincing as pain shot through her body. Daniel quickly reached out. "Hey, take it easy. You're hurt." She slapped his hand away. Despite her weakness, her movements were fast, almost too fast. Her instincts screamed warrior. "Who are you?" she repeated, her voice low but firm. Daniel exhaled, raising his hands in surrender. "Relax. I'm not your enemy. I just saved your life." She glanced around, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. The solid ground beneath them was barely safe, but it was better than sinking in the black mire. She looked down at herself, her damaged armor and the strange golden markings glowing softly on her arms. Then her eyes snapped back to him. "You carried me?" she asked, her tone filled with disbelief. Daniel shrugged. "Would you rather I left you there?" She narrowed her eyes but didn't answer. Instead, she inspected her wounds. Her armor was cracked, but her body was already healing, the golden glow pulsing faintly over her skin. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "That's not normal." She ignored his comment, shifting slightly, testing her strength. Even in her injured state, she radiated power. Daniel could tell she wasn't just some lost traveler. There was something different about her. A distant howl echoed through the swamp. Daniel's muscles tensed. That sound was not the leech beast. It was something else, something bigger. The alien woman noticed his reaction. "You fear the creatures of this world." Daniel scoffed. "Only the ones that can eat me." She studied him for a moment, then nodded, as if deciding something. "You are brave, for a human." Daniel smirked. "I'll take that as a compliment." Before she could respond, the howling grew closer. Whatever was coming, it was moving fast. Daniel quickly grabbed his pack and pulled out a small energy scanner. The screen flickered with multiple red dots. His stomach tightened. "We have a problem," he muttered. The alien woman followed his gaze toward the swamp's edge. The mist was shifting, shapes moving within it. Then, they appeared. 3 massive creatures crawled out of the fog. Their skin was covered in jagged black scales, their glowing red eyes locked onto their next meal. Their clawed limbs dug into the ground, their nostrils flaring as they caught the scent of fresh prey. "Swamp stalkers." Daniel cursed under his breath. These beasts were faster and stronger than the leech beast. He had seen them rip apart armored drones like they were made of paper. The alien woman slowly stood up, still weak but balanced. Daniel glanced at her. "You're in no condition to fight." She didn't answer. Instead, she lifted her hands and pressed them together. The golden markings on her skin flared with energy, and suddenly, her wounds began to heal faster. Daniel's eyes widened. "What the?" Before he could finish, the lead swamp stalker let out a deafening roar and charge. Daniel grabbed his pulse rifle, aiming for the beast's head. He pulled the trigger. The blue energy bolt slammed into the creature's skull, but it barely flinched. "Yeah, that's not good," Daniel muttered. The alien woman stepped forward. "Stand aside," she said, her voice calm. Daniel gave her a skeptical look. "You can barely stand, and you want me to." Before he could finish, she vanished. No, she moved too fast to see. 1 second she was beside him. The next, she was on top of the charging beast. The creature roared in surprise, thrashing wildly. But she was already in motion. Her fists glowed with golden energy, and she slammed her hand into the creature's skull. The impact was earth-shattering. The swamp stalker's massive body collapsed, its skull cracking under the force. The other two creatures hesitated, their instincts screaming that they were no longer the predators here. Daniel just stared. Okay, what? The alien woman turned to the remaining beasts, her golden eyes burning with intensity. They fled. Daniel exhaled sharply. I did not expect that. She stepped forward, wiping the black blood from her hands. Her breathing was steady now, her strength fully returned. You are lucky I awakened in time, she said, a hint of amusement in her voice. Daniel shook his head, still trying to process what he just witnessed. All right, who are you really? He asked. She finally looked at him, her expression unreadable. My name is Zyra Valkar, she said, and I am the last celestial guardian. Daniel blinked. The what now? Before she could explain, a loud explosion echoed in the distance. A bright red light flared in the sky. A distress signal. Zyra's expression darkened. They found me, she muttered. Daniel frowned. Who? She turned to him, her voice serious. The ones who tried to kill me. The red flare burned in the sky, its glow reflecting off the thick mist of the swamp. Daniel's stomach tightened. He had seen distress signals before, but this one wasn't a call for help. It was a warning. Zyra's golden eyes stayed fixed on the sky, her face tense. They found me, she muttered. Daniel glanced at her, gripping his pulse rifle tighter. Who exactly is they? Zyra turned toward him, her expression unreadable. Hunters. They were sent to track me down and eliminate me. Daniel frowned. And why would anyone want you dead? She hesitated, then finally said, because I am the last of the celestial guardians. My people were wiped out. Now I am the only one left. Daniel's mind raced. He had heard of the celestial guardians, legendary warriors from the stars, said to be powerful enough to destroy entire armies alone. But they had vanished long ago. Yet here she was. Before Daniel could respond, the swamp shook. A distant thudding sound echoed through the air. It wasn't an explosion this time. It was footsteps. Heavy, powerful, getting closer. Zyra's expression darkened. We need to move. Now, Daniel didn't argue. He grabbed his gear, and together they rushed through the swamp, weaving between massive, twisted roots and patches of glowing fungi. The air was thick with moisture, and the ground squelched beneath their boots. As they ran, Daniel's mind raced. If these guys are after you, what do they want? Zyra's voice was grim. They want to finish what they started, the extinction of my people. Daniel glanced at her. Well, that's not terrifying at all. Suddenly, a sharp whistle cut through the air. Zyra's eyes widened. Get down. Before Daniel could react, she grabbed him and pulled him behind a thick tree trunk. A split second later, boom! The ground exploded where they had just been standing, sending dirt and shattered roots flying into the air. Daniel coughed, covering his face as debris rained down. Sniper, Zyra growled. They're already here. Daniel's pulse pounded. A sniper. In this terrain, whoever these hunters were, they were deadly. Peering through the twisted branches, Daniel spotted a figure in the distance. Clad in sleek, dark armor, the hunter stood on an elevated ridge, a high-powered plasma rifle aimed directly at them. Daniel gritted his teeth. We can't stay here. Zyra nodded. We need to take them out. Before Daniel could protest, she vanished again, moving at an inhuman speed. In the blink of an eye, she reappeared behind the sniper. The hunter barely had time to react before Zyra grabbed his weapon and twisted it out of his hands. The hunter snarled and spun, pulling a combat knife. But Zyra was faster. She slammed her palm into his chest, sending him flying into a tree. He slumped over, unconscious. Daniel stared. Okay, I am never playing cards with you. Zyra ignored him, picking up the sniper's rifle and inspecting it. This is high-level tech, she muttered. They're serious. Daniel stepped closer, keeping his weapon ready. "How many more are there?" Before she could answer, a deep mechanical voice echoed through the swamp. "Zira Valkar, we have you surrounded." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. He turned his head slowly. Through the mist, 5 figures emerged. Each one wore black armor, their visors glowing red. Their weapons were large, powerful, designed to kill quickly. Zira exhaled. "The Void Hunters," she murmured. Daniel's grip tightened on his rifle. "You know them?" Zira nodded, her expression cold. "They were responsible for hunting down my people. And now, they've come to finish me." One of the armored hunters stepped forward. "You are alone, Guardian. Surrender, and your death will be swift." Zira smirked. "Alone." Then, before anyone could react, she moved. With blinding speed, Zira charged forward, closing the distance in an instant. Her fist glowed with golden energy as she slammed into the first hunter, sending him flying backward. The other hunters reacted instantly, raising their weapons. Daniel didn't wait. He dove for cover, raising his rifle and firing. Blue energy bolts ripped through the air, forcing the hunters to dodge. One of them turned toward him, lifting a plasma cannon. "Oh, that's not good," Daniel muttered. He rolled just as the cannon fired, a massive blast obliterating the tree behind him. Zira took out the second hunter, her movements fluid and precise. She ducked, spun, and struck with the force of a hammer, sending another enemy crumpling to the ground. Daniel cursed under his breath. These guys were too strong. They needed a way out. Then he saw it. Behind the hunters, there was a narrow ridge leading deeper into the swamp. "Zira," he called, "we need to fall back." She took down another hunter before gritting her teeth. She didn't like running, but she knew they were outnumbered. "Fine," she muttered. In a blur, she grabbed Daniel's arm, and then they were gone. Daniel's vision blurred as she rushed them through the swamp. Moving so fast, the world became a smear of colors. They didn't stop until they were far away, hidden within a dense thicket of glowing plants. Daniel collapsed, panting. "Okay, never doing that again." Zira scanned the area, her face still tense. "They'll keep hunting us," she said. "They won't stop until I'm dead." Daniel sat up, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Well," he said, "if they're hunting you, that means they'll come for me too." Zira looked at him, her golden eyes serious. "You should leave," she said. "This isn't your fight." Daniel chuckled dryly. "Yeah, well, too late for that." He met her gaze. "If they want to take you down, they're gonna have to go through me first." For the first time, Zira's expression softened. "You are either very brave," she murmured, "or very foolish." Daniel smirked. "Probably both." Then, far in the distance, the hunters' voices echoed through the swamp. The chase wasn't over yet. The air was thick with mist, wrapping around the twisted trees like ghostly fingers. Daniel and Zira moved quickly, their boots squelching in the muddy terrain. The voices of the Void Hunters echoed behind them, distant but growing closer. "They won't stop," Zira whispered. "They're trained to hunt in any environment." Daniel exhaled sharply. "Great. Love that for us." Zira paused, scanning the area with her golden eyes. Her muscles were tense, her posture ready for battle. "We can't keep running. We need an advantage." Daniel looked around. "Well, unless you can make a fortress out of vines and mud, I don't see any advantages." Zira smirked. "Not a fortress. A trap." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "A trap? Against highly trained, heavily armed killers." She nodded. "This swamp is full of dangers. If we use them wisely, we can turn this battlefield in our favor." Daniel sighed. "Fine. But if we die, I'm blaming you." Zira knelt and pressed her palm against the damp earth. She closed her eyes, and for a brief moment, the ground hummed. Daniel frowned. "What are you doing?" She opened her eyes. "Listening." Then she pointed. "That way. There's a place where the ground is weak. If we lure them in, they'll sink. Daniel gave a half-smile. Quicksand style. Zira nodded. Exactly. They moved fast, reaching the swampy area within minutes. The ground was unstable, bubbling slightly as if alive. Zira turned to Daniel. Now we just need bait. Daniel sighed, already regretting what was coming. Oh, I hate this plan. Zira grinned. Try not to die. The hunters arrive. Daniel took a deep breath and stepped out into the open. He whistled loudly, his voice echoing through the trees. Hey, hunters. Your armor looks heavy. Hope you guys can swim. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the trees rustled. A red visor glowed through the mist, followed by 3 more. The Void Hunters had arrived. Daniel gripped his rifle. His heart pounded, but he forced himself to look confident. The lead hunter raised his weapon. You should not have gotten involved, human. Daniel smirked. Yeah, well, I have a bad habit of making poor life choices. The hunter stepped forward, then stopped. His boot sank slightly into the mud. Zira's voice suddenly rang out from the trees. Too late. Before the hunters could react, Zira fired her energy weapon at a branch above them. The shockwave shook the trees, sending a massive pile of vines and debris crashing down onto the swampy ground. The earth gave way. The lead hunter sank instantly, his armor dragging him down. Another hunter tried to jump away, but Zira was faster. She lunged from the shadows, grabbing his arm and twisting. With a sharp movement, she threw him into the sinking ground. The third hunter opened fire, plasma bolts screaming through the air. Daniel dove behind a tree, his pulse racing. Zira, he yelled. This plan better be working. She dodged and weaved, her speed almost impossible to track. Just keep them distracted. Daniel gritted his teeth and raised his rifle. He took aim and fired at a nearby tree branch, causing it to snap and crash down on the last remaining hunter. The armored figure stumbled, giving Zira just enough time to strike. With one final blow, she sent him tumbling into the sinking mud. The swamp had claimed its prey. The aftermath. Daniel breathed heavily, lowering his weapon. That actually worked. Zira nodded, wiping sweat from her brow. For now. They watched as the hunters struggled, their armor pulling them deeper into the mud. Their weapons were useless, and their movements only sped up their sinking. One of the hunters glared at Zira. This is not over. She stepped closer, her golden eyes cold and unshaken. No, but you won't be there to see the end of it. With that, she turned away. Daniel exhaled, glancing at her. All right, what now? Because I have a feeling that was just the welcoming party. Zira looked up at the darkening sky. The red flare was still burning in the distance. More were coming. She turned to Daniel. We keep moving. Daniel sighed. Yeah, I figured you'd say that. They disappeared into the mist, while behind them, the swamp slowly swallowed its latest victims. Daniel's breath came in ragged gasps as he sprinted through the dense swamp, his boots sinking into the mud with every step. The darkness around him was thick, almost suffocating, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Behind him, the hunters were closing in fast. He could hear their mechanical voices, their heavy boots crushing the wet ground. They weren't just tracking him, they were hurting him. Somewhere in the distance, Zira had vanished into the shadows, moving with the precision of a seasoned warrior. She had a plan, and Daniel had to trust her. But right now, he had his own problem. Survival. A sharp whistle cut through the air. Daniel ducked just in time as a pulse of red energy shot past his head, hitting a tree and blasting a chunk of it into splinters. He threw himself behind a thick root, barely avoiding another shot. Keep running, one of the hunters called out in a cold, metallic voice. You can't hide forever. Daniel wiped the sweat from his forehead, his mind racing. He needed to think. He had no advanced weapons, no armor, nothing that could go head-to-head with the hunters. But what he did have was the swamp itself. Glancing around, he spotted a series of thick vines hanging over a murky, bubbling patch of ground. If he was right, that wasn't just mud, it was quicksand. An idea formed in his mind. It was risky, but it was his only shot. He grabbed a loose vine, wrapping it tightly around his wrist. Then, taking a deep breath, he leaped forward, straight into the quicksand. The moment his feet hit the surface, he let his body sink, gripping the vine just enough to keep himself from going under. From a distance, it would look like he had been swallowed completely. Seconds later, the hunters arrived at the edge of the quicksand, scanning the area. "Where is he?" one of them muttered. "He was just here." One of them took a cautious step forward, his boots sinking slightly into the unstable ground. Perfect. With a sudden yank, Daniel pulled the vine, swinging himself out of the quicksand and landing on solid ground. At the same time, the hunters lost their balance. The unstable ground beneath them shifted, pulling two of them down into the pit of sinking mud. They struggled, but it was too late. The swamp was relentless. Daniel didn't wait to see the outcome. He turned and ran, vanishing into the jungle. The hunter becomes the hunted. Zara moved like a shadow, her steps silent as she stalked through the underbrush. Unlike Daniel, she wasn't running. She was hunting. Her golden eyes flickered in the darkness, tracking her targets. The remaining hunters were searching for Daniel, their attention focused on the wrong prey. Zara smirked. They had made a mistake. Moving swiftly, she climbed a tree, perching herself on a thick branch above the hunters. She had fought enemies like them before. Their technology was powerful, but they relied too much on their scanners, not enough on their instincts. She reached for her belt, pulling out a small energy blade. It wasn't large, but in the right hands, it was deadly. She dropped. The first hunter didn't even see her coming. Zara landed behind him, her blade flashing as she disabled his power core in a single precise strike. He collapsed instantly, his body going limp. The second hunter turned, but Zara was already moving. She dodged his attack, weaving through the jungle with inhuman speed. The hunter fired wildly, but the swamp was too dense. His shots hit nothing but trees. Zara used his panic against him. She darted behind him, striking a weak point in his armor. Sparks flew as he collapsed, his systems shutting down. With the last of the hunters dealt with, Zara vanished once more into the night. A desperate escape. Daniel finally reached the meeting point, a clearing near an old ruined temple. He was exhausted, his body aching from the chase. Moments later, Zara appeared from the shadows, completely unscathed. "You look terrible," she remarked. Daniel let out a dry laugh. "Feel worse." Zara nodded toward the swamp. "I took care of the others. But more will come." Daniel sighed. "Then what's the plan?" Zara glanced at the ruined temple behind them. "We go inside. There's something in there we can use." Daniel frowned. "What is it?" Zara's expression darkened. "A weapon." Daniel's breath caught. He had seen what Zara could do without a weapon. If there was something even stronger inside that temple, then things were about to get a lot more dangerous. But right now, danger was better than death. Without another word, they stepped inside. Daniel stepped carefully into the ancient temple, his breath steady, but his heart pounding. The stone walls were covered in strange alien markings, glowing faintly in the darkness. The air was thick with dust, and the smell of damp stone filled his nose. Zara moved ahead of him, her golden eyes scanning the ruins. She had been here before. He could tell by the way she walked without hesitation. "What is this place?" Daniel whispered. "A vault," Zara replied. "Built long ago by my ancestors." Daniel ran his fingers along the carved symbols on the wall. "And the weapon?" Zara stopped in front of a large stone door. "It's inside." She pressed her hand against the center of the door, and the markings flared with light. A deep rumbling sound echoed through the chamber as the stone began to shift. The door slowly slid open, revealing a massive chamber beyond. Daniel's eyes widened. The room was filled with ancient technology, glowing crystals, metallic structures, and strange floating orbs. But in the center of it all stood a pedestal, and resting on it was a long silver spear, humming with energy. Zira stepped forward, her face serious. "This is the celestial spear." Daniel frowned. "It doesn't look like much." Zira picked up the weapon, and the moment her fingers touched it, the room shook. A surge of power rushed through the air, making Daniel's skin tingle. The spear began to glow, lines of blue energy running along its surface. "This is not just a weapon," Zira said. "It is a key to something far greater." Daniel took a cautious step closer. "And what exactly does it unlock?" Zira turned to him, her expression unreadable. "A ship. One powerful enough to take us off this planet. A dangerous betrayal." Before Daniel could process what Zira had just said, a sharp sound rang through the air. Boom! The temple shook as an explosion erupted from outside. The ground trembled, sending dust and debris falling from the ceiling. Zira's grip on the spear tightened. "They found us." Daniel turned toward the entrance. "How? I thought we lost them." Zira's expression darkened. "We did, but someone led them here." Before Daniel could ask what she meant, a familiar voice echoed through the chamber. "I'm afraid she's right." Daniel spun around, his blood running cold. It was Krail. The tall alien warrior stood in the doorway, his dark armor reflecting the dim light of the temple. Behind him, several heavily armed soldiers stepped inside, their weapons aimed directly at Daniel and Zira. "You've been a real problem, human," Krail said, his voice dripping with amusement. "And you, Zira, you should have never come back." Zira's eyes narrowed. "You betrayed your own people, Krail." Krail chuckled. "I did what was necessary." He gestured toward the spear in Zira's hands. "Now, hand over the weapon. You can't win this fight." Zira's grip tightened, her muscles tensed. For a moment, there was silence. Then, without warning, she moved. With blinding speed, Zira launched herself toward the nearest soldier, using the spear like a blade. The energy coursing through it sliced through armor like paper, and the soldier collapsed instantly. Daniel didn't hesitate. He grabbed a loose stone from the ground and hurled it at another soldier's helmet, buying himself a few precious seconds. The room erupted into chaos. Laser fire lit up the chamber, blasting against the ancient stone walls. Zira fought like a blur of motion, her spear cutting through enemies with precision. Daniel, though less skilled, used his instincts, dodging, weaving, and using the environment to his advantage. But Krail was waiting. The alien warlord lunged at Zira, his own blade crackling with energy. Their weapons clashed, sending out sparks. "You can't stop me," Krail growled. Zira pushed back, her eyes burning with defiance. "We'll see about that." The desperate escape. Daniel knew they couldn't fight forever. More enemies were coming. If they didn't get out now, they wouldn't get out at all. His eyes darted around the chamber, searching, thinking. Then he saw it. At the far end of the room, partially buried under rubble, was a control panel. If Zira was right about this place being a vault, then it had to have defenses. "Zira," Daniel shouted, "we need to activate the temple's security." Zira ducked under Krail's blade and nodded. "Go." Daniel sprinted toward the panel, dodging laser fire as he ran. He didn't know how the controls worked, but he didn't need to. He just started pressing every glowing button he could find. For a second, nothing happened. Then the walls came alive. From hidden compartments, turrets emerged, their barrels glowing blue. Mechanical drones dropped from the ceiling, scanning the intruders. And then, they opened fire. Krail's soldiers didn't stand a chance. The automated defenses cut them down in seconds. Krail barely managed to dodge, his face twisting in anger. "This isn't over," he snarled, before vanishing into the shadows. Daniel panted, his hand still on the controls. That worked. Better than I expected. Zira grabbed his arm. No time to celebrate. We need to get to the ship. Daniel nodded. Where is it? Zyra pointed toward a passage hidden behind the pedestal. Through there. Without hesitation, they ran. As they disappeared into the darkness, the temple shook once more. The ancient structure was collapsing, its power systems overloaded. But Daniel didn't look back, because freedom was just ahead. Daniel and Zyra raced through the collapsing temple, their footsteps echoing against the ancient stone. The air was thick with dust, and the walls shook as the structure crumbled behind them. We're almost there, Zyra shouted. Daniel could see the faint glow ahead, a massive underground hangar hidden beneath the temple, and in the center of it, resting on a stone platform, was the ship. It was sleek and silver, unlike anything Daniel had ever seen before. Its surface shimmered with blue energy, and its design looked more advanced than anything from Earth. Zyra didn't slow down. She leaped onto the platform and pressed her palm against a control panel. The ship's doors slid open, revealing the glowing interior. Get inside, she yelled. Daniel didn't hesitate. He jumped in, his heart pounding. But before the doors could close, a familiar voice echoed through the chamber. You really think you can escape? Daniel spun around, his stomach tightening. Krail stood at the entrance, wounded but still standing. His dark armor was scratched, his face bruised, but his eyes burned with rage. He held his energy blade, its red glow flickering in the dim light. You don't deserve that ship, Krail spat. You don't deserve the spear. Zyra raised the celestial spear, her expression calm but fierce. And you don't deserve to lead. Krail let out a growl. Then fight me, warrior to warrior. Zyra didn't move for a moment. Then she stepped forward, twirling the spear in her hands. You want to fight, Krail, she said coldly. Then come and take it. The duel. Krail lunged first, his blade slashing through the air. Zyra dodged effortlessly, her movements fluid like a dancer. The spear clashed against Krail's sword, sending sparks flying. Daniel watched, his hands clenched into fists. Zyra was fast, but Krail was strong. Every strike shook the ground, every movement filled with deadly force. Krail swung his blade in a powerful arc. Zyra barely dodged, rolling to the side. She countered with a swift thrust, but Krail blocked it at the last second. You can't win, Krail sneered. I was trained for battle since birth. Zyra's eyes narrowed. So was I. With a sudden burst of speed, she sidestepped Krail's next attack and drove the spear forward. It pierced through his armor, crackling with energy. Krail staggered, his eyes wide in shock. Zyra twisted the weapon, and with one final push, sent him crashing onto the stone floor. His blade clattered away, and he gasped for breath. I was supposed to be stronger, Krail muttered, his voice weak. Zyra knelt beside him. Strength isn't just about power, she said softly. It's about protecting others. Krail's eyes flickered for a moment, then closed. It was over. Escape to the stars. Zyra pulled the spear free and turned to Daniel. We need to go. Now. Daniel nodded, stepping back into the ship. The engines hummed as Zyra activated the controls. The temple shook violently, massive chunks of stone falling from the ceiling. The structure was collapsing completely now, the energy of the spear having destabilized it. Zyra gripped the controls. Hold on. With a roar, the ship lifted off, rising through the crumbling ruins. Stone crashed all around them, but the vessel was fast, faster than Daniel had ever imagined. Within seconds, they burst through the surface, soaring into the alien sky. Daniel let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He turned to Zyra. We made it. Zyra nodded, but her gaze was distant. This is just the beginning. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? She glanced at him. The celestial spear wasn't just a weapon. It was a message. Daniel sat up. A message to who? Zira took a deep breath. The real warlords. Krail was only a pawn. There are others out there, stronger, smarter, and more dangerous. Daniel's stomach dropped. So we're not safe. Zira gave him a small, knowing smile. Not yet. Daniel exhaled, shaking his head. Well, I guess we'll just have to fight. Zira smirked. Good, because this fight is far from over. The ship roared as it sped through the sky, leaving the burning ruins behind. And ahead of them, the stars stretched endlessly, waiting for their next adventure.